Hey there, listeners. Before you tune into this super sweet episode, spoiler warning is in effect. This episode is airing just after Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 has left theaters in the US. So if you haven't seen the film yet and want to remain spoiler-free, you might want to come back to this episode once you've seen the movie. And of course, tune in next week. Thanks, and happy listening. So often in media, we see people dealing with daddy issues, lacking a paternal figure in their lives and being damaged because of it. Much rarer, however, is the mother abandonment issues. Having a terrible mom, or a dead one, is something to be dealt with, but it never seems as severe as with dead or shitty dads. Disney has made a whole business out of dead moms. Hell, 6 of the 11 official Disney princesses have a dead mom, and it's barely an issue for any of them. Pocahontas' mother gets a brief mention, and then she's all but supplanted by a talking tree. Rude. So it is kind of refreshing that there is one character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe for whom the loss of his mother is at the center of his emotional strife, and that she is what also helps him connect to being a stronger and healthier person. He just has to be a little bit of an asshole first. An asshole who saves the galaxy. Welcome to my office. I'm the Cine Analyst, looking at what makes fictional characters tick. Today's case file: when a Walkman is more than a Walkman. Mourning, loss, and family ties. Subject: Peter Jason Quill, aka Starlord. The movies: Guardians of the Galaxy Volumes 1 and 2. Welcome to the Cine Analyst, that one show with the asshole sitting at the microphone, picking apart the actions of fictional characters solely for your pleasure. Peter Jason Quill is like Batman. Okay, I know so many people are like Batman on this show, but I promise there is a point. Peter is like Batman because the 2 major traumatic events of his life happen in quick succession. For Batman, it takes a few days, maybe weeks, but that's still relatively close. Peter's happen literally seconds apart. The first one is the death of his mother. When we first see Peter at the beginning of the first film, he's in the hospital as his mother lays dying of brain cancer, surrounded by her entire family. You can tell from Peter's behavior that he's suffering. He's withdrawn, he's disengaging from the situation through music, and yet is still connecting to his mother. Just not the one that's present at the hospital, but rather the healthy version who he still has all the good memories of. When forced by his grandfather to engage with his sick mother, and asked to hold her hand in a moment of comfort, Peter recoils. He pulls into himself. Which, to the emotionally matured adults, seems kind of crass, but to a little Peter, it's more about rejecting the reality in front of them and hoping that if he doesn't engage with it, that somehow means it's not real. However, it is unfortunately in this moment when his mother dies, and pretty instantaneously too. Peter realizes his moment has passed and he furiously reaches for her hand, hoping now that it will make the difference. But his mother, the person he loved the most in this world, is gone forever. Distraught and frightened, he runs out of the hospital and out onto the lawn, collapsing in a sobbing heap. That's when he's picked up by Yondu and his Ravagers and whisked off to a world of planets, piracy, and pop culture references that are incredibly out of date. Even though Peter is supposed to be taken to his father, an act which we learned would have had some interesting consequences, he stays with the crew for all of his adolescence and well into his adult life. Now, I'm not here to judge the life of a fictional pirate because, hey, we're all just beings in the universe, but I'm guessing there weren't a lot of maternal figures in Peter's life after that point. It sort of explains why he constantly hooks up with women, but doesn't really connect with them emotionally. However, he's not a sexist jerk. He doesn't degrade women or hypersexualize them, though the trailer for the first movie sure liked to. But Peter generally treats them more or less the same as men. This means that his behavior is not entirely a matter of objectification, but rather one of emotional distance. We definitely know he didn't process his emotions until the very end of the first film. The surest sign of this is how he keeps his mother's final gift to him pristine, but always hidden away. Can you imagine touting that thing with him ever since he was a little kid? Through all that grime and insanity that was his upbringing on a pirate ship? And yet, he still refuses to open it, and when confronted, barely acknowledges what it is. The other major remnant of his mother that Peter keeps and protects is his Walkman. Sure, how else is he going to listen to his favorite tape long past the reasonable amount of time a tape and a Walkman should be able to survive? But it represents the only way to continue to link him to his mother and her world, which is why he literally risks remaining caught in prison and dying in order to get it back, and is particularly offended when one of the prison guards attempts to use it. After all, without it, he can't listen to any of the music his mother loved. But, interestingly enough, at the end of the second film, that technology is destroyed along with the rest of the ship. But Peter doesn't freak out about it. In fact, when he gets the Zune at the end, courtesy of one of the Ravagers, he's more excited about its ability to hold more songs than being able to hear the music his mother loved. Music is how Peter best connects to his mother and her memory. After all, he even brings music into battle with him during the first scenes of the second film, and the film uses it to introduce her and her relationship to Peter's father, Ego. Hell, Ego even uses a song to explain why he essentially had to leave Peter's mother behind on Earth. So what happens at the end of the first film and the second film that the destruction of these tapes and the Walkman/tape deck are easily accepted by Peter? Well, that's what we're here to look at. So let's take a look at both films to further pull apart our dear Starlord. Like I said in the intro, Peter is a little bit of an asshole when you first meet him. His family, for the part that has been comprised of Ravagers who, for one reason or another, keep making threats to eat him, are generally very rough with him. He mostly looks out for himself, travels alone for the most part, and generally only seeks companionship of the temporary variety. So sharing and caring weren't really at the top of his learning priorities. Still, he's able to hold together a band of misfits and ends up saving the entire universe. He does this by grabbing a hold of an Infinity Stone, which is the Marvel version of whatever ultimate power MacGuffin you're most familiar with, before it touches the surface of a planet and kills everything and everyone on it. While dealing with the unimaginable pain, he sees Gamorra as his mother, which, side note, is not at all surprising, but we'll get to that in a minute. And then he finally takes her hand, and in doing so connects with her, and is able to bear the burden for the stone for longer. Afterwards, the band shares a family-like bond and decides to stay together into the second movie. Once we make our way into that second movie, there are some rough patches to the whole pseudo-family thing. Everyone's personal hangups start to get in the way of actual progress, and Peter's are right up there with them. While he's finally able to come to terms with his mother's passing and all that it meant for him, in a way that we'll talk about later, he still has to develop the muscles of trusting others and dealing with his feelings, especially his feelings for Gamorra. Gamorra is her own big bag of problems, and if they ever gave her story more screen time than just kicking ass and occasionally spouting exposition about Thanos, she probably would have gotten her own episode. Seriously, is it so much to ask for like a scene or two about her past? Not that anyone else gets much screen time either, but in any case, she is Peter's main love interest. However, her interest in him is kind of unclear. She's definitely fond of him, but looks at him more like a big sister, as if bemused and a little embarrassed by his not well-concealed crush. There are hints at the end of Volume 2 that this might be changing, but I think the relationship does work better if they're just close friends or family, and there is a reason for that. Why does Peter fall in love, or, at least like or lust, with Gamorra? It's not hard to be impressed by her badass skills and her genuine nature, and Peter has been with plenty of other women, or, at least he claims to. So, why Gamorra? Well, it's clear that he sees Gamorra as his equal, and opens up to her for the first time. It may be one of the few times he's interacted with a woman for any meaningful period of time that wasn't aimed at having sex or otherwise flirting. However, she's the complete opposite of his mother. She doesn't know a thing about music or really seem to care for it, and she certainly doesn't seem inclined to dance. For her, life is a struggle for survival, and such frivolous distractions are kind of meaningless. But Gamorra is also compassionate, She's diligent, and like I said before, genuine. She fights for what she thinks is right, and she always tries her best. And there's one thing that I think just clinches it for Peter. When he first plays the tape that his mother gave him before she died at the end of the first film, Gamorra stands by Peter in support and smiles. After a moment of listening, she even begins to sway a little. Probably just to make him happy, even if she doesn't really feel like dancing. That willingness to do something just to make Peter smile, to reach out emotionally in such a pure way, is definitely something rare for Peter. And boom! He caught the feels. Gamorra sort of ends up as Team Mom, if only because she's the voice of reason and sanity among an otherwise crazy and impulsive bunch. Seriously, she's the only one who ever seems to understand danger or know how not to turn an entire planet of people against them. Volume 2 has Peter's father Ego showing up, and immediately Gamorra senses that something is wrong, which of course takes everyone else the majority of the film to figure out. Peter is so blinded by having a parent back that he doesn't care, and Drax is just really stupid. You can even see it in how she protects and is so maternal with baby Groot. She literally has to be stopped from saving Peter when the planet starts to fall apart. The only way she could be more of a team mom is if she literally had to pack their lunches for them and keep them from putting their fingers in the electrical sockets. And I think Peter picks up on that and subconsciously wants that, even if he doesn't really need it anymore as a mostly fully formed adult man. Those qualities to him are desirable, and as such, his fondness for her grows deeper. And no, don't worry, I'm not here to say that Starlord has an Oedipal Complex where he wants to sleep with his mother, because A, that complex is reaching at best, and B, no. Just no. Peter's feelings for Gamorra do come up in Volume 2 when he thinks that she's trying to get in between him and his newfound dad, the one who can answer all of his questions and give him more insight into his mom. In fact, Ego validates Peter's view of his mother, whose family thought she was a little crazy because she would tell Peter that his father was of the stars. He tells Peter of this epic romance, of this great and tragic love, and how he tried to get Peter and how they could be a family again. The story that Peter always kind of wanted to believe. However, Ego makes a deadly mistake. He assumes that Peter's desire for power and to be with, quote, his own kind outweighs his love for his mother. The scene itself in Volume 2 is just a moment of pure gold that I'm gonna need to break down to tell you why it works. Ego is going on and on about how he betted a bunch of different aliens in the hopes that eventually one would produce an heir with powers, and how Peter's mom was his favorite. So much so that in order to keep him from going back and seeing her constantly, he kills her by putting a brain tumor in her head. Now, in any other film, we the audience would have gotten a beat while Peter processed the information, weighing it against his values and coming to terms with the shocking news. However, not but a second after the words are uttered, Peter flies into a range and just starts shooting. To kill, by the way, and screaming about how Ego could dare to kill his mother. To Peter, power and kinship mean nothing if it meant his mother had to serve as sacrifice. All his feelings of closeness and love for Ego dissipate in that one moment, and he refuses to concede any emotional ground to allow Ego in his life. For Peter, such a sin is unacceptable, and the fact that he then attempts to kill Gamorra and all the rest of his quote-unquote family makes it even worse. It is in this light where Yondu's, we'll call it fathering, comes into greater focus, though I definitely have my qualms about the inconsistencies between the first and second film's portrayal of the character, which don't think that I'm not going to go into at some point. Yondu saves Peter from potentially being killed, like all of his other half-siblings were, and more or less raises him to be an adult. When Peter's in trouble, having finally met Ego, Yondu immediately goes to save him. He taught Peter how to shoot and how to fend for himself, taught him a trade even if it is technically dubious if not outright illegal, and even saves his life after Ego's implosion threatens to kill them both. Yondu's sacrifice makes Peter realize a truth, that he has a family in the Ravengers and in his crew, that love is not just a matter of blood relation, and that is how Peter is able to let go of the Walkman and the tapes, because his love for his mother and the love of his mother mirrored in the love between him and the others, he can now accept her love through them and through the Zune he gets. Though how he's going to load songs into the Zune itself is actually a good question that they'll probably never answer. So if you've been listening to this season for a while, you know what the next question I'm going to pose is. Does Peter have an ego split? And boy, is that a tough question to answer. Like I said, Peter faced 2 major traumas in his childhood, and definitely faces another one at the end of Volume 2, given his father's essential murder of his mother and the death of Yondu. But kids don't usually have a strong enough ego to split, and there was no strong desire confronting self-perseverance in that last trauma. However, if there's one moment where Peter is confronted with this kind of decision, it is in fact in the first movie in the Collector's shop, when the Collector's assistant/slave kills herself by grabbing the Infinity Stone, and everyone sees the serious power that it has. It is in that moment when Peter sees what is really at stake. He goes from wanting to get his payday to wanting to make sure that the galaxy isn't destroyed by a crazy psychopath. It's not that Peter is confronted with his own mortality, but rather is confronted with the brutal reality of death once more, the helplessness and the damage that it creates. He knows the pain of surviving, and he's seen the pain of death, and he's had enough of both. We see the immediate effects of the split right after that scene, when he saves Gamorra's life after she's been abandoned in space by her sister. When he attempts to describe why he literally almost died for a woman that, at this point, he barely knows, he says this to her.
I look around at us. You know what I see? Losers. I mean, like, folks who have lost stuff. And we have, man, we have, all of us. Our homes. Our families. Normal lives. And usually life takes more than it gives, but not today. Today it's given us something. It has given us a chance.
She then of course cuts him off and the line is taken as a joke, but honestly, it's pretty telling. He feels this need to save her the way he wants to be able to do by protecting the Infinity Stone. To save her like he couldn't save his mom. I mean, even the act of saving her is layered in symbolism. As she floats through space, he takes off his breathing mask and places it on her, allowing her to breathe as he begins to freeze, almost giving her his breath. Oh, okay, so that last bit may be a little too much reading in between the lines, but my point is that you can see these immediate effects of an ego split in this very specific scene, and also what I think is the beginning of the healing process. But more importantly, Peter also sees himself in his crewmates, the broken, the beaten, and in many ways the suffering, or perhaps as he more eloquently puts it in a little speech.
I saw you out there. I don't know what came over me, but I couldn't let you die. I found something inside of myself. Something incredibly heroic. I mean, not to brag.
Peter, despite fearing death, despite knowing that they are almost certainly doomed, is the one who pushes to move forward, the one that argues for saving everyone. And when he must face off against Ego in the second film to keep him from taking over the galaxy via some weird alien plants, he does so without question or doubt. Peter is willing to give it all up without a second thought because of his desire to protect all he loves, like he couldn't do before. There's one last matter that we touched on in the beginning of the episode that we have yet to resolve. The reason why Peter is able to accept Yondu's death is because he has had closure at the end of the first film about the death of his mother. It is only after he almost dies and has a vision while holding that deadly, powerful Infinity Stone of taking his mother's hand, which is really Gamorra's hand, that everything finally comes full circle physically, mentally, and emotionally, in such a way that he can start to process his feelings, that he can finally read his mother's last words to him in a birthday card, and finally listen to the first song on the tape, which is of course the iconic song about being together through thick and thin, across all distances and time, ain't no mountain high. Perhaps even more symbolic. While Peter sheds a tear for his mother, he's still able to move on with his space adventures, to emotionally connect with his crew and go off to save more and weirder galaxies. Volume 2 is all about coming to terms with the world that could have been, and learning to find family around you, rather than building up this imaginary one or wishing for something better. Yondu may not have been a great father, but he was still a hell of a lot better than Peter's biological father, who turned out to be an insane, murdering planet. Gamorra, Drax, and Rocket may not exactly be stable, but they're more loyal and caring than any other family we've seen him have. Peter not only saves, but is saved. He not only learns to trust, but is trusted. He not only learns to give, but he also finally gets. And that's why he's able to be a guardian of the galaxy. Next week, we're going to talk about a Batman villainess, but it's definitely not the one you're thinking of. Or that one. Or that one either. But until then, I'm the Cine Analyst, and I'll see you at our next session. This episode of the Cine Analyst was written and recorded by me, Sarah Roncero Menendez. You can find the Cine Analyst on Twitter and on Facebook at The Cine Analyst, all one word, or you can find us on Tumblr at thecineanalyst.tumblr.com. This episode was mixed and edited by the awesome Angela Yee. Original music by the amazing Hua Pham. You can find more of his excellent work on soundcloud.com/euphemy. That's EUPHOME. Our logo was designed by the wonderful Priyanka Bose. Find more of her spectacular work at priyankabose.net. The Cine Analyst is part of the Outerhaven Productions family of podcasts. For news on gaming, tech, entertainment, and anything else a well-informed nerd could want, check out theouterhaven.net.